Hey everyone, this is Chris with Unicorn Riot. I'm here at the Northumberland County Courthouse in Sunbury, Pennsylvania. I was inside this courthouse for about a 3-hour hearing this morning in the case of the Northumberland 2, Celeste, Legere, and Cara Mitrano. They're two women accused of being involved in an October 18th, October 19th incident at the Richard H. Stahl & Sons Fur Farm, which is a place that grows and kills minks for fur just down the road from where we are here. They're facing a bunch of really serious charges in Pennsylvania State Court. They were facing charges including RICO and eco-terrorism and another long list of charges. So the hearing today was their defense lawyers filed an omnibus motion for a habeas corpus, essentially arguing that the prosecution didn't have enough evidence to bring the charges to trial.
My name is Chris Caraway. I'm the staff attorney at the Animal Activist Legal Defense Project at the University of Denver Law School. I'm one of the attorneys representing Cara Mitrano.
We're Cara and Celeste from the Northumberland 2, and we want to thank everybody who came out to court today and everyone who's following our case and giving us support. Thank you so much.
This is a case that has been grossly overcharged to a level that's absurd. You know, charging someone where the allegations is a non-violent act as terrorism is absurd. Charging someone with aggravated animal cruelty for these allegations is absurd. Charging someone with RICO based on purported beliefs and ideas and associations is absurd. Unfortunately, the state recognized that for the RICO charge and dismissed that today. There's very little that was actually presented, and I think today's hearing, the testimony of the state's witnesses just showed how little they actually have and all the speculative leaps that are wholly unsupported in this case. So the eco-terrorism law that's specific to Pennsylvania has never been litigated or discussed in any appellate court, and to my knowledge, I don't think it's actually been charged. I think this is the first, if not one of the first. In Pennsylvania, under state law, it's not simply eco-terrorism to commit a crime related to any industry or business involved in the use of animals. There has to be, for certain subsections, an intent to intimidate or coerce. There was very little that was clarified today, and that's because there's just very little there. The next step is we're going to be submitting written briefing, talking about whether there's sufficient evidence for some of these charges to move forward towards a trial. We anticipate doing that probably 6 to 8 weeks, and then sometime after the judge will make her ruling.
So we're going to break down what we learned today, what we heard, what some of the back and forth was. The first two witnesses we heard from today for the prosecution were Mark Stahl and John Stahl. They're two brothers from the Stahl family, which owns and operates the Richard H. Stahl & Sons Fur Farm. That's the last fur farm in Pennsylvania. The fur industry has seen a very serious decline in recent years, but the Richard H. Stahl & Sons farm is estimated to have about 21,000 mink on site at any given time. We don't know exactly how many mink they kill per year, but it's in the thousands. And we know very little about the internal operations of this farm, but in the mink industry in general, mink are either killed by being gassed, being electrocuted, or being beaten to death or having their necks snapped. One big piece of evidence we were expecting to watch today was footage from the fur farm's security camera system. However, the district attorney, Mike O'Donnell, couldn't get it to play in court, so Judge Paige Rossini just agreed. She sort of said, okay, I'll watch it later, I'll watch it before I rule on the motions. However, we know that Celeste Legere and Cara Mitrano, the two defendants, the Northumberland 2, neither of them are really identified in this footage. It just kind of shows two unidentifiable individuals releasing hundreds of minks from their pens and also destroying breeding records that are kept on little cards next to each cage. Mark Stahl of the Stahl family that runs the mink fur farm testified today that these breeding records that contain, I think he called it the genetic lineage of each mink, that's really important. So only 683 mink were allegedly set free as part of the action that's at the center of the case here. But I forget how many, but a significant more number than that of breeding records were destroyed, which decreased the value for these minks because their pelts are desirable based on certain color traits, certain genetic breed information that was also destroyed. John Stahl, who also testified, told the court that he started driving towards the farm after getting a security alert, but he stopped when he noticed a Subaru parked on a property adjacent to the site. He parked immediately behind the Subaru. He said that he wanted to keep it from leaving, and testified that he got out of his car to confront the driver and ask them what they were doing there. But he said that he forgot to put his vehicle in park, so it started rolling away. He had to run and get back in his car, at which point the Subaru, attempting to leave the area, the only way that the Subaru could get back on the road was to do a 3-point turn. And so they could only leave by backing up and hitting John Stahl's car. This is what John Stahl told the court. He told them that he parked behind them knowing that they couldn't leave because they could either hit his car to get back on the road or they could drive directly into a ditch. John Stahl then later tried to also testify that the Subaru could have driven around them, but they chose to hit him. But on cross-examination by the defense, he admitted that, yes, he did position his vehicle knowing that the only way they could leave was by striking him. Defense counsel had some pretty interesting questions for John Stahl about this. They asked him, well, are you a police officer? He was like, no. They're like, did your car say police? He's like, no. And they were like, were these people on your property when you decided to prevent them from leaving? He's like, no, they were on this other person's property. The defense asked John Stahl, did you have the property owner's permission to be there? He said no. So the Subaru that John Stahl tried to trap on the property adjoining the fur farm drove off, was later pulled over by police. Celeste, Legere, and Cara Mitrano both arrested inside the car and transferred to state police custody. Both the October 2024 release of Mink that this case is about and a September 2023 release of several thousand Mink, both incidents were mentioned in press releases or communiques by the Animal Liberation Front, or the ALF, but the defense was able to get the Stahls to admit that there's no connection of either of these defendants that they know about to the Animal Liberation Front, and that's just stuff they looked up online after they read about it in the news. We also heard from 2 state troopers today. The most significant one was State Trooper Jacob Hook of the Pennsylvania State Police Criminal Investigations Unit. Trooper Hook processed a lot of the evidence in the case and also wrote most of the first affidavit that was included with the criminal complaint. Basically, his analysis of the evidence is the basis of the case as the prosecution's been bringing it. One of the more significant parts of the affidavit written by State Trooper Jacob Hook of the Criminal Investigations Unit is the mention of so-called anarchist propaganda that was recovered from the car after the defendants were arrested. The affidavit mentions basically literature about online privacy, about using virtual private networks or VPNs to anonymize your internet traffic, or the Tor browser, another way to securely browse online, and using burner phones. Those were 3 of the examples he cited as anarchist propaganda. But defense counsel, cross-examining him, got him to admit that, yeah, there's not really anything anarchist-specific about this. The 4th piece was a notebook that contained stuff that seemed to have been taken from a Know Your Rights seminar, which is a pretty common thing in activist circles. There were some notes that Trooper Hook highlighted in his affidavit and also made sure to repeat in his testimony about not talking to the police, about how, your anarchist friends won't like you if you talk to the cops, and that, cooperating in a criminal investigation usually doesn't help the outcome of your case, things about grand jury investigations, things like that. Despite the RICO charge being dropped, a lot of State Trooper Hook's testimony revolved around his belief that there was some kind of wider criminal organization behind the events that are charged in this case. State Trooper Hook was asked several times by the defense to prove anything of this larger criminal network he claims was involved. He again used raising bail money on the jail phone calls as evidence of, people being promised money in advance to do things, which is not what the call shows happening. He also referred to jail support, people on the other end of the jail phone calls referring to themselves as jail support. He said that he'd never heard of that, and that means there's a criminal organization going on. The prosecution were asked repeatedly, were there any fingerprints? Were there any shoe prints? Did you get any DNA? None of them were aware of any of that having happened or having been collected. Certainly nothing was offered forensically linking the arrested defendants to the break-in at the farm and the releasing of the 683 mink. So that's what stood out to us as important to know about this hearing. We'll see what happens. This has been Chris with Unicorn Riot. Thanks to Dan for filming. Look out for our article with more details from today's hearing at unicornriot.ninja. And don't forget to donate, unicornriot.ninja/donate. Thank you.